We can begin in 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order and begin with the land acknowledgement statement. On Wednesday, September 28th, 2022, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Our next item of business is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to add anything before we do that? Okay, would someone move that we approve the agenda, please? Katie, and a seconder? Jenny, thank you. All in favor? Great. And next is the adoption of the minutes. We've got the two previous meetings minutes that we couldn't approve the July minutes last month, so we have two sets. So first of all, starting with the MHC committee meeting from July 21st, would someone move that we, Lorraine, and a seconder, please? That we adopt those minutes? Katie, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Passed. And the minutes of August 17th, our last meeting. Would someone move that we adopt those minutes? Jenny, thank you. And a seconder? Katie, will you second that?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's all of us who were here. So all in favor of approving those minutes? Thank you. Passed. Disclosure of monetary interest, anyone? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the agenda. Priority issue 1 is a report on the relationship between the town and the Rideau Canal. And Mary, I'll let you lead that off.
Sure. So this is an information item. So just as part of the revised scope for the bylaw rewrite project, when we were in negotiations to reduce the scope to fit within the MHC budget, one of the items the consultant proposed was to provide what was quoted review on governance and urban planning relationship between the town of Smiths Falls and the canal and lock system. For example, Parks Canada, past, present, future, recent changes, and future considerations. So this was provided to us titled a Rideau Canal Policy Review Brief. So that information is being provided with the committee. So upon my review, I realized that this is a lot of the information that's at the province and at the other agency approval levels. So I wanted to demonstrate for the committee how the town's policies generally aim to meet the intent of what the requirements coming down from the province in order to preserve the heritage landscape. So I've given you a bit of an outline from the official plan, the zoning bylaw, as well as the site plan control bylaw in terms of how we manage development in order to preserve that heritage landscape of the Rideau Canal. So I'm providing this for information purposes. And I just wanted to make a note that this will be provided to the future MHC meeting, given that there's an upcoming election, we are expecting turnover. So this will be actually available to a future committee as part of the orientation package. And if you have any questions, this would be your time to ask.
Go ahead, Tony.
One question, Mary. I read all through that yesterday. When it regards to the Rideau Canal, is that just for inside the town of Smiths Falls?
Right. So we just manage. So our policies are only applied to inside the town of Smiths Falls. The policy brief, though, that was given by MTBA, that's more broad in nature. So that's throughout the province.
So that's throughout the whole canal.
Yes, so
Okay,
yes,
yes.
because the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority likely deals with the whole watershed in that
Mhm.
area, so I imagine, yes, that it would be for the whole canal.
Okay,
The information I provided is town specific.
yes, for the town.
When you went over all that, Mary, did anything jump out at you as being missing from the town policies?
No, nothing did jump out that suggested it was missing. I did get some ideas on maybe where we could improve, but nothing seems to be missing. We do seem to be hitting the marks. What I will say is we're in the middle of doing a land needs study, which will likely fold into an official plan update. I imagine sometime next year. And at that, I'll be reviewing the heritage components and specifically the Rideau Canal components to make sure that we've improved where we can improve.
Any further comments or questions about the report? Lorraine, did you want to comment?
Just a question for Mary. I haven't seen any movement at our museum, the Rideau Canal Museum that's housed in Smith Falls, and that was very active pre-COVID. In fact, I don't even think it's been open in the last 2 years.
So I understand, and I actually think I've heard it from a member of this committee that the Rideau Canal Museum is closed down for matters that are outside of COVID. I don't have a lot of information on that. That's just hearsay.
Tony?
I had asked that question of them when I was down there doing some research, and they said they had the mandate had been changed. It's now an interpretive center only, not a museum. Anything that museum related has been moved out and into storage in Ottawa.
Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy. Mary, I'm wondering how does the official plan and the potential Heritage Conservation District come together with what's presented tonight and what we know is coming down the pipes?
Well, that's a really good question because I haven't done a whole lot of research on that myself. I imagine that would actually be part of the study. I would look for the consultants to speak to the policies of the official plan as part of the studies and let us know whether or not we need to do any updates to the OP in order to ensure that we're establishing the HCD correctly.
Okay, thanks. I guess my comment then would be when we're talking boundaries in the previous meetings, just how important it is that HCD includes the Canal District so that we've got one set of cohesive rules so that everybody's on the same page, that if you're going to develop property in a heritage area, you know, it's not different rules for different streets kind of thing. It's all on the same guidelines for consistency. But and I guess, sorry, second question here would just be kind of, I'm not sure kind of what's the deliverable or what's the timeline from the information we've got tonight?
With respect to the brief that was given from MTBA?
Yeah. Is that kind of just for information or is? That's
correct. So this is just given for information. It was, I'm not going to say it was in lieu of, but whenever we were negotiating the scope of the project for the bylaw rewrite, this was an item that they decided to put in as well to help the committee along in terms of what they could do to help preserve that feature in town.
Cool. All right, thanks.
I think I agree with you, Chris. The document emphasizes, what I took out of it, the preservation of the historic areas that aren't necessarily right next to the canal, but that are in the surrounding area. And it seems to me that a heritage conservation district, if we were to integrate everything together here, would include the part of the canal that passes through town. So I assume that we would use this document to inform the study that's going to take place.
And it's awesome they have the standards and guidelines in there, eh? I don't know if anybody else noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more comments from the committee or questions? Okay, we can go ahead with the next item on the agenda then, which is the terms of reference. So I'll let you lead off again, Mary.
Yeah, no problem. So in this case, council has actually requested that all staff, not just planning staff, assess the need for each existing committee as well as their mandate to inform any changes needed to the terms of reference for the next term of council. Because as we know, with the upcoming election on October 24th, typically what happens is that we look for new membership and we appoint new membership for the next term of council. So just the way that planning services has decided to approach this review is essentially opening dialogue with our committees to see what changes that they feel are required. So just to note, the Ontario Heritage Act does give the town discretion as to whether or not to establish a municipal heritage committee, but the need for the committee is not being challenged by any sense of the word. We definitely see the value of the committee and the advisory role that it plays to council, especially with the upcoming HCD that's slated through the budget. So that being said, we do have some updating to do to the terms of reference. One thing I did catch is that the minimum membership requirements for the terms of reference currently states a minimum of 3 public members and a minimum of 1 council member. This does not meet the minimum membership requirements as required by the Ontario Heritage Act. The Ontario Heritage Act requires a municipal heritage committee consists of a minimum of 5 members. So minimum membership requirements will need to be changed in order to reflect that a minimum of 5 members are needed to sit on this committee. So that will be adjusted. That's not really open for discussion because it's a requirement of the province. So what I've done is I've provided you with the mandate of the committee. You'll notice there's a statutory and non-statutory role of the committee. So the statutory function is primarily under the Ontario Heritage Act and advising on new heritage properties, heritage conservation districts, and so on and so forth. With a non-statutory mandate, that's where the annual Heritage Symposium would fall in, as well as our coloring contests that we've done in the past, the scavenger hunt, and just those information items that we send out into the public just to promote heritage in our community. So what I have done, and Madam Chair, I'll ask you, is I've actually outlined some questions at the end. Would you like me to address the committee one question at a time for them to discuss?
Yes, one at a time, I think would be good.
Perfect. So my first question for the committee is, should the committee's mandate primarily focus on the town's statutory mandate pursuant the Ontario Heritage Act? So for example, the heritage designations, alterations to heritage designated properties, heritage easements, districts, and studies.
All right.
I think both are necessary. I mean, when this is my 12th year, it seems to me anyway, Tony, you remember, there were a few of us at the beginning. You know, the membership number has changed up and down, but for me, part of our role, especially now when we're only 12 years being involved in it, is to educate people the importance of protecting our heritage and knowing more about it. And you know, we just had a beautiful building with an amazing heritage facade taken down. And, you know, had it been designated, that wouldn't have happened. So I think there's so much left for this committee to be working on. And it's all really important work. I don't even know how I'd say one is better than the other. I really think both are critical to the committee. It's part of their job.
Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy. Sorry, I had a hiccup in my connection. We're talking about question I in the report. Should the
Yes.
committee's mandate? Yeah, no, I definitely, I think that in order to do the statutory mandate effectively, we need to be doing all of those other things. And I think the residents are really receptive to what we've been doing, and the more education and the more things we've been putting out there, things like the coloring contest that gets young kids involved that probably might never have even thought of stuff like that before. I think it's great, and I don't think it's affecting our ability to perform the statutory mandate, so I don't see any downside.
Tony, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would say something we not to forget is like our heritage walks that we were doing. I would say 70% of the people who came out for them were town residents, which shows quite an interest in the town of heritage and what is going on and what came before us.
Jenny, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, thanks. I just agree with what's been said. I think those non-statutory functions are really what gets people interested in the statutory stuff. So I think we can use those as a way to interest more people in the designations and the alterations, etc.
I agree with all that too.
Me too. Definitely. We're already doing pretty well everything on that non-statutory list anyway, so we would like to continue to do those things, and they have not interfered with our statutory functions in the past. So I think you've got a unanimous answer to that one, Mary. If you want to go ahead with part 2, or I guess it is.
Absolutely. Well, I'll reframe the question slightly. So I've given a little bit of an overview of the non-statutory functions of the committee. So one, I'll just say, do you feel that all of the points that I've made in this section remain applicable? And is there any additional non-statutory functions the committee would like us to consider for the terms of reference?
Chris?
I think the most important thing is just having a clause saying and other duties or other responsibilities as required. I think the committee's had a really strong vision and strong leadership over the 5 or 6 years I've been involved. So as long as the committee's got the freedom to do what they see as the priority at that moment, I think the issues change and the circumstances change. But I don't know that this is something we need to have everything itemized into a list, just because it's so hard to see what the next issue coming down the pipes is going to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone else comment on that part? I think that item D that you've listed there, Mary, is probably going to be quite important as we move ahead with the district. So I'd certainly want to see that one included. C is really the same as something that's already up under the non-statutory mandate, as I think A, B, and C all are really, and D is the new one that we could add. But as Chris says, other duties as required would cover anything additional that we would want to see there. Okay, should we go ahead with the next part?
Sounds good. So this one's more about membership. So should staff consider the addition of a board member from the Heritage House Museum for membership on the committee? And just secondary, if there's any additional criteria the committee would like us to consider for membership for the committee?
Katie?
I just want to say that I think that's a great idea, to have a member from the Heritage House Museum.
Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy. My only concern is with the CIP experience, where that committee is a very staff-heavy committee, and I don't know, I don't know where that line is or what that value is. Is what this suggesting is that instead of planning staff, that the staff resource would be from the Heritage House Museum, or that there'd be an additional voting member from the Heritage House Museum? Like how would it play out in practice?
Tony, go ahead.
My concern also, Heritage House, that's also a town staff voting member. So we're not saying, actually, great idea with a Heritage House, but it's not really a Heritage House. It's the town staff as a voting member. Is that what we want?
Oh,
Excuse my ignorance, but is there a difference between a board member of the Heritage House and a staff member? Lorraine?
Staff members paid by the town and they work for the town because it's a town-owned museum. Our railway museum is not, and that's the difference. So in my opinion, the only way that would make sense is if it's just a board member. Like for instance, I'm a board member at both museums, and that's great because I'm a lover of heritage, and I think there are going to be other people that are lovers of heritage that have invested themselves in their volunteer work and whatever commitment to both, and that wouldn't be a wrong thing. I just don't think it should have to be a requirement. I think it would be a bonus, but I just like the number. I really take great concern about us putting that we have to have 5. So what if we don't have 5 next year? Are we just going to stop all the good work that this committee has done? Like, that makes no sense to me. No other committee that I sit on says they have to have any number. I mean, on the library board, I think we have 17 or some ridiculous thing on the Friends of the Library. I don't think that has to be a requirement.
Mary, you have an answer?
So a couple of things. So the first thing was that the question was framed as a Heritage House board member, not a Heritage House staff member. I was not suggesting that a town paid employee be sitting on this committee. Secondly, in terms of minimum membership requirements, unfortunately, we don't get much say as a municipality. The province requires a minimum of 5 individuals. Does that mean that the committee stops functioning? It likely means that the functions of the committee would likely be assumed by council until minimum membership requirements are met.
So where did you read that that's a requirement? Like where
So
you
it's
say
in
that?
section 28 or 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, under the subsection referring to the Municipal Heritage Committee. It states a minimum 5 members are required. It's a shall and not a may, unfortunately.
Well, we need a real push for recruitment then.
Yes, I mean, right now, this hasn't been an issue because we've maintained a minimum of 5 members throughout this term, but we will need to terms of reference to to be consistent with the act.
Chris?
Thanks, Mary. That sorry, I don't know why I misread that just a minute ago, but I guess the thing is, it'd be great to have, you know, people that are on the board of the Heritage House Museum probably have a common interest. I think it's important to explain to people that our focus is primarily architecture, and as much as it's the Municipal Heritage Committee, it's really an architecture preservation initiative. Because we could have a building that's 10 years old that if it had special architectural features, you know, we'd want to designate it and get it written up. And I don't know that the advisory committee at the Heritage House Museum's always, I'm not really sure what its role is, because when we look at the Railway Museum, you've got a governing board because it's an independent organization. When you look at the Heritage House Museum, it's owned and operated by the town. So you've got professional staff, you've got the whole municipal system. Like the advisory committee's got no statutory or authority over staff at the museum or the operations or anything else. And in the last 4 years of council, they've never had any kind of report other than events or, you know, activities going on of advice on how to manage the museum or changes that need to happen at the museum. So I don't even know if that one, I'm not familiar enough to know what's needed on it, but to say that it needs a specific member of that committee needs to be a part of our committee it just seems like some extra red tape that it'd be nice. And if we can get them to do it, let's definitely reach out to them and try to recruit some of them. But I don't see the justification for that extra step at this point. But because we could say, why don't we have a mandatory member of the Railway Museum, mandatory member of the Historical Society? But they're all different organizations with different mandates, even though we're working towards the same goal together, you know?
Tony?
Just an observation, we do have a member of the Heritage House board on the committee now.
Lorraine.
Lorraine. Yeah.
There we are.
No, it's just the initial reading of it. It was, I thought it sounded like a staff member from HH, which is okay. That's good for guidance, but I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention, it is a member of town staff.
Okay, and the other part was, are there any other suggestions for membership? It would be very nice if we had somebody with who knew about, who was an architectural historian, but I mean, we're not going to magically find one of them, I don't suppose, Chris.
Yeah, we could have a rule that if you're an architect living in the town of Smith Falls, you must at
You
least
must join the committee.
Yeah. No, this is one where we've had this conversation at the procedural bylaw where how can we get younger people involved? We've got the student counselor positions, but they're not that effective because the students can't vote. They can participate, but it's a very limited role with a lot of work that needs to be done, reports to be read and the like. So like, I'd love to see students participate in these committees if they can. If there's no rule from the province that says they can't participate as full voting members, I don't see why somebody, 14 years and up wouldn't bring a valuable perspective and want to contribute and get involved in the projects we've been working on if it's something that really suits their interests. So if there's a way for us to lower our age so that high school kids could be involved, I think that would be a really neat way of expanding our reach and also maybe bringing in some new members.
Sorry, quick clarification, Chris, I missed that last point, as well as, you said students, but then I heard as well as, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Or I think just bringing in new members to the group, if we had 1 or 2 students that wanted to participate, it would help us get to that 5, right?
Thank you.
Okay, and any further comments on that part? No, well, let's go ahead with the last section then, Mary.
Yep, so the last question there is that the current role of the staff liaison is predominantly limited to record keeping, providing information to the committee in accordance with the terms of reference. And my question to you is, how should this role evolve to help the committee achieve its mandate? So just want to keep in mind, there is a little footnote on the bottom. Just wanting to let you know, I don't believe it's been announced to the committee publicly yet, but we do have, the planning department has grown. We do have a new planner 1 who is looking at focusing on development, so he'll be able to take over that portion of my job that's been taking me away. So the idea is that it's hopefully going to open up additional time that I can play a more predominant role with the heritage sector and working with this committee. So we would like to know how that additional time to work on this committee should be framed at best to assist you.
Lorraine?
Yeah, I'm just looking back at the beginning of the Heritage Committee when I was on it. And at that time, the town planner was a student. There was a student, it was Nikki Dwyer, and she was very, very knowledgeable and passionate about heritage. And she, with the board members at that time, set everything up. And I think it would be ideal if the liaison that we had was someone that's either passionate about it or has taken that part in their training, like, you know, that heritage has been part of their training. I think that's one of the reasons when we hired the people that did the designations, that's because of their expertise in that. So, I mean, the more expertise we can have and as our liaison, the better for this committee and the better for our town as it moves forward, because we have a lot of work to do still on the properties that are waiting to be designated and protected.
And I'm just thinking ahead, you know, to a new term. But as we move forward, we now have a template for new bylaws, right? So there's going to be more time needed and more work done in order to prepare one of those to move forward for a designation. More complexity there, I think. So that's certainly one of the things that we're going to need, because we have a long list of properties of interest. And as Carl mentioned, I think at the last meeting, just because we're going for a conservation district doesn't mean we shouldn't be moving forward with those designations, especially if some of them appear to be at risk. And I think that's happening. Any other comments about that? Maybe we just need to see how things unfold and what requirements surface at the time. Okay. Are we finished with that item, Mary?
I have no more questions.
Okay, great. So then back to the agenda. We're on project updates now. So the first one is an update on the research on 11 Market Street South, which is a property of interest currently.
That's correct. So we, as the committee is aware, we did retain a consultant to do the cultural heritage evaluation report for 11 Market Street South, also referred to as a share. So we were expecting that to come in the second weekend of September, and we were hoping to have something for you to have your eyes on. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a delay with the retrieval of additional information from the Heritage House Museum. So the original date for the completion of the share has now been delayed, and we're expecting it to be submitted October 7th. So I would have something next month for the committee to see.
Okay, thank you. And the heritage bylaw rewrites and new heritage designations. I guess everything's well underway.
Yes, so it is well on their way, as Dorothy knows, because as committee chair, she's been copied in all the notifications. There was a bit of a timing issue with the statutory newspaper ad for the new designations. So that we had initially slated October 17th for this to go back to council. However, with the consideration of election day on October 24th, the entire bylaw package, that's the 14 bylaw rewrites and the 3 new designations, have been scheduled to go forward at the last meeting of this council on November 7th.
Anyone have questions about that? Well, that's really good. Oh, go ahead, Lorraine.
Our last day that the council will have council meetings where they're going to be actually voting on things is it's right after the election date on the 24th. I didn't think that we met in November.
So I had discussed with the clerk that November 7th was the last meeting of council, not committee of the whole, but council. So that there would still be the opportunity to pass a bylaw at the November 7th meeting, because inauguration for new council isn't until November 15th. I can double check that with the clerk, Lorraine, and I can send a line after.
Okay, let's move on to roundtable then. Tony, let's start with you. You must have things to tell us.
Well, we have been a little busy at the museum. We had over 900 people show up on Saturday, which was great. Well, we just had an amazing season. I wasn't quite prepared for roundtable. There was probably a couple other things, but maybe I can kick in after. But I will say I'm very disappointed with what's been going on at the waterworks and how it's being let to continually deteriorate. I don't think the town should be leading in conservation with their demolition by neglect. What they're doing what they're doing at the waterworks is sad. It's very bad, and I just hope something can be rectified with the new council or whoever is supposed to be looking after the building should be looking after it. Maybe that's a better way of putting it, but it's sad the conditions it's becoming. Anyway, that's about it.
Mary, do you know whether there was ever any response from community services about that email I wrote with the photos that Carl forwarded to them?
So I will follow up with Carl tomorrow. I was away the day that email came in, so Carl was handling it directly. So I will speak with him tomorrow and provide an email update.
Thank you. I certainly agree with you, Tony. It's not what they're doing, it's what they're not doing.
Yes, it's very simplistic. Simply from the start, for probably under $100 a month, they could have had the building wired by advanced alarms, and
yes.
it would have been in the condition. It would not have been vandalized to the extent it has been.
Mm-hmm. And that was what I was going to bring up for a roundtable, so we've covered that one. Katie, do you have anything?
Sorry.
No, that's okay,
I do.
Tony. I'm glad you mentioned it.
The Friends of the Library and the Station Theater are working together to bring back Film Night International. And so once a month, starting, it's the fourth Thursday of each month, it'll be an afternoon movie in the afternoon and one in the evening, the same movie. And the profits are being shared 50-50 between the theater and the Friends of the Library. So Karen Schechter's in charge. She's getting the films from TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival. And they'll be outstanding, interesting international movies that we will be delighted to watch. It'll be $12 a ticket or $6 for 60. So there'll be a free ticket in there. And they'll be at 2:00 in the afternoon and at 7:00 at night. Starting on the fourth Thursday of October. No movie in December.
Okay. Good, thank you. That's nice to know.
Yeah.
Jenny, do you have anything for roundtable?
Dorothy, I don't think I do this month.
Lorraine?
I was wondering, we were given the Heritage Conservation District, and I was curious, I thought maybe is this going to be talked about at another meeting? Like, we're running out of meetings. But
That's true.
They gave it to us last month. It was.
Did I miss a meeting? Probably, I guess that it was talked about at that meeting, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was talked about, but we were supposed to come up with some form of consensus within the committee, and there weren't enough people at the meeting. So you're right, we deferred that, and we didn't put it back on this month's agenda. So perhaps we should be revisiting that, Mary.
Yes, so we can. There has been discussion in the office just regarding whether whether or not the first necessary step to establishing an HCD is actually a heritage master plan to demonstrate how the town as a whole should be approaching heritage. So actually, that's on my work plan to start researching next week to help me just to help inform a decision in that regard, whether or not we should really be looking at a heritage master plan before we take that HCD step. So if you would like, I can facilitate so that and try to time it so that my research is done to help inform the committee's discussion next month. So that is the reason why I thought that it would be best to defer maybe till October so that I could do more evaluation on whether or not we should be pursuing a master plan for heritage first.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Lorraine?
I just thought that we had already made the decision, this committee had made the decision that this was the next step, that one of the things we wanted to do. And then this kind of presents, as I read it, I was surprised because the one that is almost the whole town, how in the world would that be manageable? Like, to me, that just didn't make any sense. But
Even so, none of them include the canal.
no, I know.
Again today, the small, the medium, and the big still don't extend to the other side of the canal. So, Mary?
So I guess I wanted to chime in. So the reason why staff are kind of wanting to visit the idea of whether or not we need a heritage conservation master plan, let's call it, is because when we were looking at that large conservation area, we realized that a heritage conservation district, especially even just focused on the downtown and the architectural attributes we would be looking to recognize, really does cover a vast area. So in the students' report, the Rideau Canal corridor wasn't included. It was discussed at last month's meeting with limited attendance that we would like to see that corridor included, but just also acknowledging that there is several houses in Brockville Street in those shoulder areas that exhibit very similar features to the downtown area. So the thought of staff was, and this kind of goes hand in hand with Jenny's comment last month, is the biting off more than we can chew. We may not have the staff resources to handle a large conservation district right off the hop. So it's a heritage master plan is more of a guiding exercise to help us take the step in the right direction as to how we should be approaching heritage conservation as a whole across town and not just within the downtown or within the HCD area that ends up being defined by the study. So that's something that's being evaluated by staff. A decision hasn't been made, obviously. I'm not sure if it would need to go back to council in that because the money was put aside for the HCD study, but we're trying to take a look into that because ultimately that downtown core area and those features that we'd be looking to recognize really can extend far beyond what the committee was originally looking at.
Jenny?
Just a question, is that not what the study would tell us? What the best area is?
So yes, the study would define and establish boundaries. The Heritage Master Plan wouldn't establish boundaries for an HCD. It would help give us guiding policies in terms of approaching heritage conservation as a whole across the entire boundary of town. So it wouldn't be focused on a specific area.
Okay, Chris, do you have anything for roundtable?
Well, I didn't, but this is a huge piece of news that I believe should have been on the agenda. I'm profoundly disappointed. This completely changes what I thought we had agreed to as a council, what we'd been told as a committee. It changes our timelines, it changes everything. And I'm disappointed that this wasn't brought up during the reporting process when it came to council. I'm disappointed about everything about this. I'm really concerned about when we talk in this third person staff staff's ability to do this, staff's resources. With this stuff, we've had really good experience with MTBA and the write-ups on the water treatment plant, especially. And I'm wondering if the direction is to start doing more of that outsourcing to professional consultants that can that have the experience doing this all the time, that we can get things done. Yeah, I just don't understand why this is coming up in roundtable and why it hasn't been reported back to council, because I believe council is still under the impression that this is moving through the tracks. One question would be, what does this do to our timelines? Are we talking about completing this in 2023? Or could this be 2024, 2025? Where are we at now?
So I apologize, Chris, this seems like disappointing news. So as you know, in the office, in terms of staff, as much as we try, we aren't a consulting agency that has vast experience in the heritage sector. We try to approach this best we can. So in terms of the Heritage Master Plan, it's not necessarily that it contradicts the idea of a heritage conservation district. It's a matter of evaluating whether or not that really is a necessary first step in towards the heritage conservation district, and whether or not we need the guiding policy of a heritage master plan in order to successfully launch a heritage conservation district. And that's the evaluation that essentially needs to happen on our end. What this does for timelines is, as far as I'm concerned, we're on track. This was brought up to me in terms of my work planning for the next 12 months. This is relatively new to me too, so I can understand the apprehensiveness. So it was brought up to me during my 12-month work planning, and I planned it out that I will be conducting research in October in order for us to figure out what really is the appropriate approach. And this will be discussed with the new Municipal Heritage Committee. I'm hoping to actually have a draft RFP package for whatever the necessary step is, whether it is moving into that Heritage Conservation District as discussed, or having to pursue a Heritage Master Plan. The plan is for me to actually have a draft RFP for a committee review in January or February 2023 for launch before spring of 2023, so that work on that policy could be done throughout next year. So from my perspective, regardless of what heritage policy ends up being undertaken, it would follow the same timeline. But right now, this is just something that's being, I guess, discussed at staff level as to whether or not this was the necessary first step that maybe we missed in our research. And I apologize for that if I've created an apprehensiveness that I didn't mean to. But yes, that HCD, it's not that it's on the back burner so much as the question among staff is, do we need a heritage master plan before we move into this to tell us how we should be approaching heritage conservation as a whole?
Tony, you want to comment?
Yeah, no, it's more of a question. I'm gathering by this that staff is taking over the direction of what's heritage in town and what's not, and they're going to be notifying us what to look at for heritage instead of vice versa. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I'm not sure, are you speaking to me or are you speaking to the chair, Tony?
Oh.
Just a question for on what you have been saying to us about, the Heritage Master Plan. So is staff going to be advising the committee what to be looking at in terms of heritage? Is that the direction we're going in? I don't quite understand.
Okay, so I was trying to clarify that what we're trying to do is figure out whether or not the step before the Heritage Conservation District is typically, and in most areas, a heritage master plan. So I'm not saying that the Heritage Conservation District is a no-go or whatnot. I'm saying that I will admit the fact that we don't have the best heritage resources, right off the back, and we're basing off of research, and we're trying to do the best research we can to make sure that this is executed correctly. And we're evaluating whether or not what is needed before establishing a heritage conservation district is a heritage master plan. So that's a little bit of evaluation and research that needs to happen on our part in order to inform the committee correctly on what the appropriate steps are to establish a heritage conservation district. And not
And is
just the
it-
committee, but also council.
Is this something that you've discovered other municipalities have done?
So this is something that was brought to me. It's not something that I discovered on my own. Please keep in mind that this is, I'm a little bit at the bottom of the tier here. So information gets communicated to me and I look into it further to try to figure it out. And I work with the higher ups and my supervisors and managers in order to figure out what the best approach is, where council approval is needed, and so on and so forth. So at this point, this is just a research exercise. I guess I'm tripping on my words here because I didn't mean to cause a havoc. I will just state that we're at this point, it's research as to whether or not the heritage master plan is supposed to be a necessary first step, because we have found information that suggests that it should be, but we need to evaluate and research that more.
I've read this thing back and forth, probably some of them maybe 4 or 5 times. I have never seen any reference to the Heritage Master Plan. So forgive me, but it's all news to me. I just wondered where the information came from.
Well, if we're going to be addressing this issue at next month's meeting, perhaps we could ask that Carl attend as well. Perhaps he could clarify for us, Mary.
Sure.
I mean, you said it came from higher up, so I'm kind of assuming it was Carl. I shouldn't assume that, but.
Well, yeah, so I will say that one of the things that Carl, when he was looking at heritage conservation districts and reviewing other municipalities' heritage conservation districts more, he had found that more often than not, that the heritage conservation districts were informed by a heritage master plan as kind of like a stepping stone. So he wanted me to evaluate and research further whether or not it was a stepping stone that the town of Smith Falls needed.
Okay. Any further comments? Or additional items for roundtable? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the next meeting date, which is October 19th. And that, I assume that's our last meeting as the current committee. Is that correct, Mary?
I will confirm, but I do understand that this committee can run until December of this year.
Oh, okay, all right.
Good, we can have a party.
There may be more things that come up. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Would someone move that we adjourn?
I can do that.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.